Hello, everybody. How are we doing tonight? We are recording on February 18th, 2022. It is a Friday evening. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave Miller. Dave, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Very tired, but I'm all right, yeah. Just how about yourself?
I'm good. Long week, but definitely
Yeah.
had excited now as the union start off in a matter of 8 days from today's date. So easy to get over the tiredness when you know the union are right around the corner. But a lot to talk about tonight. For one, the biggest news for sure is the fact that Jamiro Monteiro is no longer with the Philadelphia Union. He was just traded to San Jose for $450,000 in general allocation money, as well as an international spot. 200 of that 450 is incentive and performance based. So obviously considerable news there. The preseason also wrapped up tonight against Nashville on, like I said, on 2-18. I believe they had ended up with a 1-1 draw there. Glessens had a goal, and then lastly, we have a bit of an issue with the roster. Dave, we have some issues with Mikael Ua still not with the team. Sergio Santos hurt again, and then Corey Burke going out for his green card. So I've laid out what's on the menu tonight. What are your thoughts on this past week and a half of the Union?
More disruptive than good. Obviously, no idea who I was going to get in the country. I think we discussed it last time, earlier in the week, the last time that Corey Burke tried to get his green card. He was out for pretty much the entire year. Whether that changes this season's going to be interesting. But again, it's going to be very, very stressful start to the season for the Union, where they're essentially, we looked at it at this point, comparing the two sort of pre-seasons heading into the season from last season to now, and we were discussing how how juxtaposed they were. The Union were pretty healthy; they had the entire squad together, ready, trained together, playing in pre-season friendlies. Whereas last year there was loads of injuries, players coming and going with for international football and things such as that. And now they're sort of going back to that square one they were last year. Now where they've got one fit available striker. They've lost Montero. There's no idea what's going on with Uar and Burke. Santos is injured again. Again, it's going to be a very, very interesting start to the season, to say the least.
Yes, I agree. And even what we saw tonight with the preseason game is that you saw Carranza up top in that Christmas tree-like formation.
Yeah.
So, and now, of course, it's preseason and things are not going to be that way as the season starts, you hope. But what you didn't want to see is have them go back to that out of necessity. Now they had to do that again tonight. Now, on the positive note, that does give the younger players a chance to prove themselves and make themselves known for the roster. So there are always pros and cons to every situation, but when you are trying to compete for an MLS Cup and you have aspirations to be a top team in the East, having this question mark in a position you already are not very deep at to begin with is a huge concern for me personally.
Absolutely.
But in terms of the Jamiro Monteiro trade, I was fortunate enough to be joined by Jamon Moore of Quakes Epicenter. I'm going to pull up his Twitter handle right here. Do you see Jamon Moore at J Moore Quakes and Quakes Epicenter? Quakes Epicenter, EPICENTER. I reached out to him over the past week once the Jamiro Monteiro trade went down, and I asked him to speak with me for about 15 minutes in regards to how the franchise is looking over in San Jose, how the fans are reacting to the Jamiro Monteiro trade, and as well as just his thoughts on where Montero falls into that roster. So in a second, you're going to see that play right about now. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on a special interview edition of Across the Pitch. As you can see, I'm here, Mike Barrera, your co-host. Unfortunately, my co-host, Dave Miller, could not join us today because of the time restriction. As you guys know, he is in England, so there's a bit of a 5-hour difference between the two of us. But regardless, I'm not alone today. I've been fortunate enough to be joined by Jamon Moore of Quakes Epicenter. He is covering the San Jose Earthquakes, and as you all know, Jamir Monteiro was just traded to San Jose, so I wanted to bring him on to chat for a couple minutes to discuss the trade and to kind of share his thoughts. So, Jamon, welcome. How you doing today?
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me on. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be with us as well. So, if you could just share a little bit of your background, just so the local Union fans can kind of get an idea of what you do for the team. I know a lot of them watch and follow as many MLS teams as possible.
Yeah, so I run the day-to-day for a site called Quakes Epicenter. We have some of the best writers that cover the San Jose earthquakes. We have about 6 writers cover the San Jose earthquakes for our site. We also have our own show. It's a post-game show called The Aftershock, where we basically broadcast the press conference with Matias Almeida and players after the game, and then provide our thoughts and insights. And right now we're doing more recorded type shows because it's preseason, obviously, and starting to get everything underway. And articles up on the site for preseason and all kinds of things going on.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah, I was able to check out, I believe, 1 or 2 of the Aftershock episodes. It's really good stuff. You guys have, obviously very knowledgeable about the team. And I specifically looked at the Jamiro Monteiro discussion you had, I think, about 2 days ago.
Right.
On face value, when you first heard the news, what were your initial reactions to Jamiro going to San Jose?
It's exciting. Anytime you can get a DP, quality player, and you see the reaction of the Union fans, there's certainly, a feeling that that he's going to be missed. And when you read the articles from Jonathan Tannenwald and others, you can see that he was considered a very valued player. Some would say maybe the best player at times on the Union over the past 3 years. And it's always good when your team gets a player that other people and other fans see value in from their side. That's always a good sign when you can get that type of player.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are not familiar with the deal, it was first released around Valentine's Day, just before 2/14. Jamiro Monteiro was dealt to San Jose for $450,000 in general allocation money, as well as an international spot. So it's we had acquired him for 1.98 million from FC Metz back in 2020. So obviously, the return, if you ask a lot of fans, may not have been what we wanted. But overall, it definitely seemed like it was the best situation for both parties, both Jamiro and the Union, and as well as San Jose. Now, in terms of the fan reaction, I mean, I know you mentioned your personal thoughts there, but what are the fans thinking about now that you guys have had a pretty busy offseason?
I think they're trying to figure out, how he's going to fit in, because right now the Quakes do have a lot of attacking pieces up top. Now, none of those are going to match the output that Chris Wondolowski had at his zenith. But at the same time, you've got Cade Cowell, who had 5 goals, 5 assists last season. You have Benji Kikanovic, who is, basically, they picked him out of USL from the Reno affiliate when that folded. And he came on toward the end of last year and added several goals and an assist, and he's excellent on the ball. He can play winger. He can play a 9. Chris Leach's first move when he was interim GM was to go out and get Jeremy Abobasi. And Christian Espinoza is a DP and has been DP quality every single season for the Earthquakes, posting some of the best top assists in the league during his 3 years, as well as expected assists, which means, particularly from open play, which means that, he's the assists that he's generating, he's earning through his play. And it's, so there's a lot of attacking pieces. And then you have Shofis, who Lopez, who they have on loan from Chivas Guadalajara. And Shofis was the top goal scorer for the team last year. Wow. Now, Shofis's loan, he's the attacking mid at the moment, and his loan ends at the end of June. So if you extrapolate things forward, you could see a situation in which they don't extend the loan, and Jamiro is going to be taking over that attacking mid position. They already have some depth at the 8 and the 6. So they acquired Jan Gregus from Minnesota United. He became available in the offseason. They already have Eric Remedi, Jackson Newell, Judson, and a couple other younger players. So they've got a good bit of midfield depth already. And some people would say, why go out and get another midfielder at this point? But I have to believe that he is going to be a piece that they look at that attacking midfielder position, particularly if Showpiece's loan is not extended. He'll be the only true attacking midfielder, in the squad as of right now. So if nothing else, they have depth. 2 DPs basically playing the same position, because Showpiece is also, at the moment at least, a DP, although it remains to be seen if he'll be bought down with TAM or not for this season. And we'll kind of see how all that plays out. I expect Showpiece to start the season. Obviously, Jamiro is just now arriving with the team, and it's going to take him time to get fitness. My understanding is he was not in the Union preseason and in camp. Mm-hmm. So that tells me he's got fitness he's going to need to go through over the next few weeks in order to get match fit. But probably we could see him as a sub for a game or two. And but my expectation is they'll start the season with Showpiece, and then they'll work Jamiro into the lineup as soon as it makes sense to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And for any San Jose fans that are unaware of his production, in 75 games, 70 of them being starts, he had 9 goals and 21 assists for the Philadelphia Union. But Jamiro Monteiro was much more than just the numbers that we saw on the box score. His motor, for one, was by far one of the best on the squad. I mean, you talk about someone who will run his hardest, and he looks small on camera, and even in person, he looks a little small. But when he really wants to use his body and be physical, he can be. I think that's one thing to be very excited about. Jamiro is certainly someone that will put his body on the line when needed for the badge. And on top of that, he's also very creative. If you think back on the year when Brenden Aaronson was with the Union, his creativity really showed up the most in that particular season, especially when Brenden was working out of the 10. This season was a bit different. You had injuries with Santos and Burke. Casper being up top by himself wasn't always the best. But as you saw the season develop, and as you saw Daniel Gazdag getting more and more time in that Christmas tree formation, you saw the pairing of Gazdag and Montero up top be much more dynamic and, I would say, productive as the season continued into the year. So I think that's something exciting for the San Jose fans. If you have somebody around him who can play off of him and use him in a creative way, I think he could definitely be similar to what we saw 2 years ago rather than last year.
And I think those are two things that you mentioned there, I think, that are really important for San Jose fans, is that motor. Yes. And one of the things that Showpiece does not possess is exactly that. Showpiece, doesn't contribute much on the defensive side. He tends to create holes that have to be filled by other players. A lot of people felt Jackson Ewell took a step back last year. And now there's a lot of reasons for that, because he's had a lot of time he was spending with the national team and kind of in and out of the team. And I don't think ever really kind of got his head into the season fully. But a lot of that was because he had to cover for Showpiece and the gaps that were being left in the field that he kind of creates, because he doesn't do those defensive things that Jamiro does. And for me, one of the reasons I think Matias Almeida and Chris Leach really wanted to get a player like him is they need a pressing 10. They need somebody who can go out there and cover the type of ground that, say, like a Nico Lodeiro does for Seattle. If you got somebody who can cover that much ground, it makes things that much easier for the players around him. From the creative side of things, one of the things that I've read that held Jamiro back last season is particularly without Brenden Aaronson, he didn't have that pace last year.
Exactly.
In front of him. And the thing that the Quakes have in spades is pace. Cade Cowell, one of the fastest guys in the league. Benji Kikanovic, sleeper. People don't know this. He's as fast as Cade Cowell is. And I think the league is going to wake up to his abilities this year from that side of the ball. And Christian Espinoza, super fast guy in his own right. Shea Salinas has been known for his speed throughout the years. The guy's getting older, and he's still very fast. Jeremy Bobasi, also a pretty quick player. So that's a lot of speed that Jamiro is going to have in front of him that he can take advantage of. That's a lot of off-the-ball runs that are going to be being made, I believe, will unlock that creativity that you're talking about. And I think that's the reason for Quakes fans to be excited. And I think for Jamiro himself, the prospect of having creative players, fast players in front of him like that, I think is going to be very tantalizing for him.
I think you bring up 2 points that kind of segue into the next thing about Jamiro. The discussion has been had time and time again in Philadelphia. Is he more of a 10 or is he more of an 8? And I think Jim Curtin has said it himself. Jamiro, further back on the field at the 8 position, can take advantage of that space in front of him. And we've seen it time after time where he's been able to be more effective in that role. And personally, when I was thinking of the starting lineup this year, I thought of him at the 8 in the left side of the diamond. I thought that's where he was best suited. But to go to your point in terms of the players around him, Kasper Shibilko, a much slower forward than we're expecting. You have someone like Ali Bedoya. I love Ali Bedoya, great captain, but he's also getting up there in age a bit, slower. And then you have a player like Leon Flock. Leon Flock, as good as he is in terms of a motor and defensively speaking, he does not possess the same offensive skill set as someone like Jack McGlynn, who's on our bench, as someone like Brendan Aronson, or majority of the players that we have on our staff. So I think Jamiro being around that pace, and that was the biggest thing for the Union last year, is when Sergio Santos was not on the field, the pace was so evident, or so evidently not there. And I think as you've highlighted a couple times already, I think that's where Jamiro would really thrive overall. Now, in terms of
to your point about the just to your point about the left, one of the things that Shofis does is Shofis likes to roam the right half space. I could see a situation in which Almeida brings out some sort of formation. I don't know if it'd be a Christmas tree type thing, but I think he could throw out something like a 3-4-3 or something like that, where he's got Shofis on one side, he's got Jamiro on the other, he's got also Jeremy Abobasi in the middle. He throws on a couple wing backs, and now he's got, you know, Jackson Newell and Jan Breguš or Judson, you know, in behind. And I could see a kind of a 3-4-3 in which, you know, he rolls out a couple forwards alongside of Abobasi that could kind of give that kind of left and right and allow Abobasi the room in the middle. And so I could see, because of his pace, his ability to cover ground, that Almeida could be a little bit more interested in, say, doing something like that. Again, a lot of this has to do with what is Shofis's long-term intentions with the team, and is it just a swap we see Shofis, you know, for Jamiro? But, you know, at this point, we don't really know, and you know, there's options, and I think right now a lot of the things that Chris Leach is trying to do is give Matias Almeida a lot of different weapons, a lot of different options. So that really this season and the success of it, or lack of it, for the Earthquakes is going to be completely on Matias Almeida and his ability to get the most out of what Chris Leach has given him, which is more, I think, than Matias Almeida has had in years past.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to reference the show, The Aftershock, that you have for the San Jose Earthquakes. I believe you guys said that Jamiro raises the floor, right? Not necessarily the ceiling, but the floor of the team. And as Chris Leach has said, you know, in addition to raising our level of creativity, we believe he is a strong fit for our style of play and should make us more dynamic in attack and defense. And if you're adding all those extra additions to the team along with Jamiro, I think you're spot on with saying the you know, Coach Almeida definitely has the pressure now on him to come out and produce a good product. But of course, every player has their flaws or their downside or something that they can work on. And last year we had some issues with Jamiro overall. Have the fans shown any concern, or have there any concerns from the team or anything like that regarding his presence either in the locker room or on the roster moving forward? Because I know they are probably going to offer him a contract as well.
John Tannenwald reported yesterday that he's had some inside knowledge that Jamiro was given a full 2023 contract through 2023 with an option for 2024. You know, one of the things that I've talked to a couple of people kind of inside the league and that know the Union fairly well, and you know, their feeling was that Jamiro sometimes can get in his own head a little bit. He's still a player who is, you know, does look out a little bit more for himself, maybe at times than you know, always putting the team first, and has very strong ideas in terms of like what he believes that, you know, the way that the team should play and the style, and you know, how he fits into that. And clearly there wasn't a fit any longer in Philadelphia. And the Quakes probably took advantage of that a little bit and got him for, you know, a little bit less intra-league, you know, money than he otherwise should have gone for. And you know, and I'm sure that you know, you're going to make good use of the international slot in Philadelphia that came along with that, and that's worth about $250K extra game right there. That said, you know, to me, like, there is veteran leadership within the Earthquakes that I believe would be a lot of help. Not to say people like Ali Bedoya weren't, but when you think of Jeremy Abobasi, who is a vice president with the Black Players for Change in MLS, and that type of leadership that Jamiro can look to and can give him kind of like, I think the right headspace of how to be a part of this team, how to carry himself, how to properly get the things that he wants to. I could see people like a Shea Salinas, a Jeremy Abobasi, a young Gregush, a Calvo. Those guys, veteran guys who have been in the league a long time, who know how things work, and particularly Jeremy Abobasi is just one of the most amazing people that I've ever players, in terms of personality, how he carries himself, how he talks to the media, how he does all kinds of things, how he represents, himself within the league. I could really see him taking Jamiro under his wing and really kind of helping him mature as a player in MLS.
It's funny you mentioned the veteran staff on the Union, because I was on Twitter right before we started talking, and people were saying one of the concerns they have with this Union team is the lack of a true veteran off the bench. We have Ali Bedoya, of course, which is great, but you're losing Colin. You don't have Ilsinho anymore. There's certainly that one veteran presence, kind of almost like a player coach, if you will. You kind of had that with Bendik a bit as well, but the team is very much moving towards a younger lineup. And I think that was the biggest thing when we were looking at the starting lineup. Myself and my co-host Dave Miller, we were saying, man, Jamiro's not going to take a seat on the bench. He's just not. That's just not the player that he was for our particular club. But we want to see Jack McGlynn. We want to see, Paxton and Aronson and Quinn Sullivan and all these players. We want to have Leon Flock in the lineup because Leon Flock deserves to be in the lineup for how good he was last year. So where does Jamiro fit? This, in a way, answers that problem and figures it out. But at the same time, it leaves us with a very young group. And when I say young, for people who don't know, I mean, you're talking about teenagers being on your bench. You're talking about, players in their mid to late 20s, not necessarily that the veteran we had with Colin, Craval, and all those players that I've mentioned previously. So, but in terms of Jamiro, I know last season during his absence, his family not being present in his life was the biggest issue from what I saw from the press conferences. He's definitely a family first man, and I know during that time it was very tough for him to kind of go through that. So it seems like that situation has been resolved a bit, which I hope for you guys that will kind of put that side of things to rest, and he can kind of move on and play at his best level. But speaking of playing, and I'll end it with this note here. San Jose travels to Philadelphia on March 12th, so only about 20-some days away. What are your expectations when San Jose comes to Chester?
The Quakes tend to. Last year, they actually were a better road team than they were a home team. Really, their struggles have been at being able to play at home and defend their home pitch. But every time that they went on the road last year, one of two things happened. Either they made a real game of it and sometimes came away with a result, or they capitulated early and it was a boat race, and they were going to give up 3, 4, 5 goals. And so it's one of those two things. I'm optimistic with the players that they brought in. With they've actually done two things. They've actually gotten younger by adding younger veterans. So they got rid of players who were pushing things a bit higher, that were more expensive on the on the age and salary side. And, now they have brought in more like experienced players, but in the 27, 28, 29-year-old range for the most part. And I do think that that's going to bring a lot of solidity to the team on the pitch. I don't think you're going to see as much of the crazy kind of man marking all over the place that you've been used to. Matias Almeida looks like he's going to favor a 3-in-the-back system that he toyed with during the middle of last year that did work to help make the team more defensively solid. It just took away some of the attack at the same time. But it seems like that's the way he wants to start the season. And with these new pieces and with the exciting people who can cover ground like Jamiro, maybe it's going to work. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting clash of styles when the two teams get together, but they're both two teams who, do their best at spending less, but getting more out of their players and out of their team. And, it's a good opportunity, I think, for the Quakes to measure themselves up against where a team that's been successful doing that, like Philadelphia, has been.
Yeah, for the Union fans who aren't aware of the schedule yet or haven't had a chance to look, we open the year with Minnesota. We then travel to Montreal and we come back home against San Jose, and then we go to NYCFC right afterwards. So when looking at that schedule, I could very well see a scenario where we go into that San Jose game with maybe 2 draws or even 1 win and 1 loss. So I hope the Union fans don't think that San Jose coming here is going to be a cakewalk, because it's certainly not. I think from watching your show, The Aftershock, and from just listening to the additions being made for San Jose, I definitely think that could be a battle. That could be a game that we end up drawing with San Jose. And so credit to your franchise for kind of improving their roster. And I think if Jamiro does see any time, I don't know if he will by that point, I guarantee you he's going to put his best effort forward against the Philadelphia faithful. But Jamon, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on this afternoon. For those who don't follow him, he is Jamor Quakes on Twitter, and Quakes Epicenter, EPICENTER on Twitter as well. So please follow him there. The Aftershock again on YouTube. It's a great show. Like I said, I've watched 2 episodes. You guys really did a good job there. But any last thoughts about the San Jose or the Jamiro Monteiro trade before we sign off?
No, I think it's an interesting new era in San Jose with Chris Leach as the general manager. He's really kind of adopted this intra-league transfer methodology that we've seen clubs like Philadelphia use, and Colorado very successfully last year in the West, won the West with that type of approach. One of the things that the Quakes also do have is a lot of good young talent coming in through their academy system, led by Cade Cowell, as everyone knows. And, there's some exciting pieces. So expect the Quakes will try to turn it into a track meet if Philadelphia lets them. My guess is that they're going to try to prevent that from happening. But the Quakes are going to like to run. So it should be exciting soccer in that particular game.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for your time, Jamon. Have a good one, guys.
Take care.
Okay, Dave. So we got to hear from Jamon Moore on his thoughts. I thought he did a great job discussing everything there is about Jamir Monteiro. What did you think of the interview? What did you think of his thoughts, and anything that surprised you, or out of what they should expect in San Jose?
Well, I think it was a nice in-depth look into how not just how Jamiro Monteiro leaving is going to impact the Union. Obviously, as you discussed, it's going to give players like Paxton Aaronson, Quinn Sullivan, Jack McGlynn more of a chance to become more prominent in this team. It's also going to allow a player like Liam Flack to feature more. But then again, as well, in terms of the San Jose side, I sort of enjoyed listening to sort of the impact it's going to have there, because evidently he isn't going to walk straight into that team. I believe they've got a loanee. I currently catch his name. I think it's I know he's online from Guadalajara, and
they have one player on loan that may be gone come summertime. So I think that might be why Montero is brought in as almost a backup plan. So it's a few things to unpack here with the interview, as well as what Jonathan Tannenwald had released for the Inquirer. Essentially, Jamiro was a bit surprised that he was not brought back. It seemed as if he had an issue with the front office, as if the front office did not make his presence on this team a priority, and it was evident which direction the franchise was going to go. The franchise was going to go with a younger core of Paxton Aaronson, Jack McGlynn, Quinn Sullivan, etc. And Jamiro may have been that kind of odd man out in that future plan. So I think that might have been the issue in terms of why Jamiro felt that way. But I thought one interesting point that Jamon had brought up was the fact that Jamiro probably won't start for some time. And I think for me, and I mentioned it in the interview as well, in this particular club with the Philadelphia Union, that would not have been an option. He would have started. Do you agree with that?
Most likely, yes.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how do you think Jamiro takes that, kind of taking a back seat for some time?
Well, obviously, I think, again, you discussed as well that one of his better seasons, probably arguably his best season, was Brandon Aaronson, who was playing in that 10 role. And Montero was sometimes used a bit more on the left or a bit wider. And I think, again, that was perhaps an interesting discussion as well. The fact that obviously the I believe it's Javier Eduardo Lopez. Is obviously, I think it was discussed that he's perhaps not the not a very high work rating player. He doesn't like to get back and do commit to defensive duties. And again, it was discussed that it then forces players to move out of positions, move out of their roles to cover the holes and cover the gap and follow the ball. Whereas perhaps that might work in Jamiro Montero's favour, not just in the summer, but during this season, if they see enough out of him to think, perhaps he is good enough to start in that 10 role because we've got a guy that we know can do it on both ends of the pitch. I think again that's obviously an interesting sort of avenue to look into for San Jose. But again, Montero is a very versatile player. He can play out wide. He can play in a deeper central role. Mm-hmm. So again, it's not. I don't think he's going to be just limited to that 10 spot. He could easily end up, playing in the 8 or even as like a small, like a central, inverted sort of winger type player to get the ball play at his feet.
I think what you were preaching all last season is what Jamon was kind of hinting at for the Earthquakes this year, is the fact that they have so much pace on that team that Jamiro can benefit because of that. And as you heard me say, Jamir is constantly surrounded by Casper, by Santos being, half healthy, by Leon Flock not being creative enough, by Ali Bedoya being older, et cetera, et cetera. He did not have that same type of pace that he could have thrived in his current situation, which he finds himself in San Jose. But I mean, overall, I'm happy that Jamiro may have found his place in the league right now, because I think he kind of would have had an off season again this year with the Union. At the same time, Dave, this now changes the way we view the lineup. So the starting 11 with Jamiro Monteiro out. What is your starting 11 pending everybody is available to play?
I think it's probably the exact same team that you probably would have started last year, apart from the two strikers, which is Juan and Carranza. We have Flack, Bedoya, Martinez, and Gazdag in the field. Again, I think it's quite weird that the Union are looking for the more youth approach, especially for a team that is wanting to go out and trying to win this MLS Cup. I'm not saying, I don't want to come at Alan Hansen and be like, you don't win things with kids, with obviously which the famous quote referencing Man United during the early to mid-90s. But it's quite an interesting sort of thing where the Union are in a sort of a win now mode. Yep. But then they're also looking at these future profits, thinking if we can just shoehorn in the younger players now, we can sell them on for more money. Because that was quite an interesting point that was discussed during Jim's press conference about Jamiro Monteiro probably leaving and obviously getting the green cards and freeing up more designated player spots, was that they'd have more money. It would give them more resources to earn more money. So I don't really know what the Union's approach is here. Obviously, in the win now mode, and they now revert, sort of trying to sit back and think, okay, we're just going to try and make as much money as we can, or are they actually looking to win now? It did sort of confuse me a bit, sort of the comments in the press conference, and obviously as you've just said there, like they want to go for a more youthful approach. Again, it's obviously exciting to see these young kids sort of break their way in, but it does start to seem the Union are looking more perhaps to making the profits as opposed to trying to push on and make that extra step in the MLS and things such as that.
Yeah, I think it put it. So I mean, first off, your back line is great. I think you have Kai Wagner, you have Glesnes and Jack Elliott. You would hope have an amazing year, right? You think they're going to get better and better. We talked about this on the other episode. That Jack Elliott. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, Kai Wagner might not even be there come mid-July.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So fair enough. So there's question marks with there, but while he's here, Kai Wagner is still one of the best left backs in the league. So you have Kai, you have Jack Elliott, who we think can have an even better season. Glesnes will be Glesnes, and then you have an expectation that Olivier Mbaizo will have a better season as well. So you know what you're going to get from your back four. You know what you're going to get from Jose Martinez. You know that Gazdag can be a better player than what we saw when he first got here, which is great. The biggest thing for me is you're putting a tremendous amount of pressure now on Leon Flock to be a very offensive-minded player now compared to what he was last year. Because without Jamiro, you need some more creativity on the field. And I'm sorry to say, Leon, but you're just not there yet, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, is there? Yeah, go ahead.
As I said, Jim obviously gets the hint from Venezuela and obviously watches Jose playing out in those wide positions and being, not just tasked to sit in front of the back four and clean up trouble and actually, get on the ball, use his skill to get forward, which is obviously, again, that's the thing I've been championing for a long time, that Jose should be playing in the 8. He is probably, out of the 3, him, Bedoya and Fluck, he is the most creative and he's the best ball-playing player out of the 3. Yet he's the one that's playing the most deepest and probably the safest position, when really he's more of a risk taker. That if he does make a mistake, it's less likely to cost him hard at the pitch, as we've seen so many occasions this past last season and get the a couple of seasons beforehand, where he's so reckless around the penalty area, he's so casual that it does cost the Union in key moments.
Yeah,
so I think
that's true.
I think him moving out the pitch will be a blessing in disguise.
Yes, I also agree with that. And if you do want to push for a younger younger group overall this year, then this would be the time where you take Bedoya and kind of push him a bit towards a 60-minute 60-minute a match kind of player. And in that regard, then maybe you take Ali out, you move Martinez up, you put Leon back in the 6, and you put somebody like Jack McGlynn on the left-hand side. There's different ways to kind of play with the lineup a bit. I just don't see Bedoya not being subbed out every single game. I don't care if he's the captain or not. I think it's the right thing to do because of
starting every game.
Or starting every game for that matter. But I think when it comes to the bench though, with Jamiro now being gone, it opens up a door for me personally for Bueno. I'm excited now to see what he can bring to the table, because he is a bit older than the rest of these kids, and we saw him be valuable in certain small spots. I think Bueno benefits from this the most, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you could argue that. I think, again, I personally feel that he'd benefit more if Jose was to move further up the field, because sort of Jose.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, again, that's not a criticism of Jose. I'm saying he should definitely be in the team, but the fact that he's so consistent, he's never injured, is he? I mean, he might flop around and act like he's been shot 4 times a game, but like he's a consistent player. He rarely gets injured. He always is there every game for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And again, that's probably Jim's insistent that he plays in front of the back 4. No one else replaces him. So that back 4, back 5, back 6 was. They never changed it last year. It was rarely ever changed. So for them, to expect that perhaps this year, when again the Union got very lucky with injuries last year in the actual season in terms of defensively, it's going to be a difficult one. Obviously, I'd love to see Bueno play a bit more, actually get a feel of what he's like as a player. But right now, it sort of seems that Jim's very much set on the team they had last year, apart from the 2 strikers.
Agreed. Well, good segue there by you. The 2 strikers that we have, the collection of strikers that we have or we don't have at this moment, is a bit concerning, and people are beginning to hold their breath regarding Mikael Uwa still not being in the Philadelphia camp, Sergio Santos hurt again, and then Corey Burke going out for his green card. And we had the issues with Corey previously with his green card, so everybody's kind of, or with his
holding their breath.
Yeah, everybody's holding their breath now with how or when Corey comes back. So that leaves you with Carranza, who's had injury problems in the past, who is basically unproven in the MLS overall. Should people be concerned? Should people be expecting a slower start? The Union have, historically speaking, have had slower starts majority of the time. They'll lose the first game or 2.
Yeah.
But yet we've always managed to come back. I know the MLS season is long. I mean, what level of concern are you right now with the season being, 8 days away?
There should be, obviously, I think there should be frustration. The fact, that it's such a weird time to be doing all these sort of things with the season so close. But I think, again, it's an interesting point to note that there were 2 trialist forwards or strikers playing for the Union friendly tonight. So again, that's a point of interest to look into. Perhaps that's a striker they might end up bringing in as like a 5th choice, or even on a short-term deal if they feel like Uwa's still months away from actually being allowed into the country, or Corey Burke's green card gets held up. So maybe they're looking at trialist forwards to help them out.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to. You can't enter the season with just Carranza, and I mean, I don't want to go back to the Christmas tree in terms of a formation to start the year, but I feel like if Carranza is the only available striker they have, I feel like that's what they're going to probably do.
Yeah.
I mean, do we see Quinn Sullivan up top? I mean, do we see
Too lightweight?
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't see who else would come in and step into that position, unfortunately. So that will leave Carranza being by himself. And then maybe that's a good test for him. Maybe that's a good way to kind of have the offense revolve around him. If anything, if he kind of thrives in that particular position, maybe it's good for the season. Kind of gets his motor going and gets him into good form right away with all the pressure on him. But I think a lot of fans on Twitter, which is where I do most of my, my duping, I guess you could say, is they're pretty concerned. And I think, the jersey reveal coming out was a bit of a, like, oh, okay, something to get excited about. But when you start looking at jerseys and T-shirts and logos, you look at this roster and there's legitimate concern, which then goes to Jim Curtin. I mean, what level of pressure does Jim Curtin have this year to win with this roster?
No, I agree again. That's what I link it back to is the confusing approach. It's sort of the teams can win now, but then they're relying upon youth players that are coming in their second year to carry the team depth-wise, when that's a lot of pressure and responsibility for kids. Well, the kids, essentially our kids, they were 17 last year, most of them just turning 18 now, to actually come in and expected to carry carry that burden of responsibility, especially when players get injured. I mean, it's again, during the season, you're going to get injured. Do you think the Union will be as lucky as they were last year in terms of, not getting as many injuries? Okay, I know obviously Corey and Sergio had plenty of injuries themselves, but they're both injury prone. But going about the rest of the team, there were minimal injuries. Most of the players kept fit. So again, it's unlikely we're going to get that in back-to-back seasons. So I think it's going to be an interesting sort of point to look at, especially when, they're playing, they have to go like week after week, the occasional midweek game. And, Paxton and Jack McGlynn have played their fourth game in a row. How are they going to be able to carry on going at that sort of standards? Do you know what I mean? It's a lot of pressure for kids to be walking into. And it just, to me, it sort of screams we're showcasing these guys to create more, get more money, get more profit. We are looking at the more profit approach. We want that Brendan Aronson, we want that Mark McKenzie money, which again is a bit contradicting to the fact that they want to win now. If you compare it to the other rosters around them, obviously again that's what makes the Union so unique, is the fact they have a fantastic academy system. But again, I'm sorry to go off on a bit of a tangent, but it is slightly concerning the approach now. Obviously, they wanting to give the younger players more game time, air them out more publicly for more people to see. But it's a big risk to take because we've never really seen it be done in the MLS before as well.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly will have more on their shoulders this year than ever before. But I think in the presser that you covered, was it the other day on Thursday or Wednesday, Jim Curtin spoke highly of Jack McGlynn. No, didn't he talk highly about him again?
Oh yeah, he said that again. These players have really high IQs and things such as that. But again, obviously, a manager's going to speak highly of those players, especially when essentially the hand he's been dealt is these are the players you've got. Where I'm sure Jim was probably as shocked as the next man to hear that one of his starting number 10s, one of his starting midfielders, one of the team's star midfielders, was being traded to San Jose, and then sort of essentially with no time to replace that player. It's by the way, this is happening. You're stuck with Quinn, Paxton, and Jack McGlynn to carry the burden for the rest of the season. So good luck with that. Again, it just sort of screams we're trying to make profit now, especially the way that Jim sort of spoke about the roster spots. It wasn't, we can utilize these in the summer to try and get a couple of very good players, and it was more, they're good assets to have. It allows us, to have more money. That's weird. It's sort of a weird approach.
I agree with that. I think if that is maybe the approach they have, I believe a lot of the Union fans will be disappointed by the end of the season. If you are relying heavily on these younger kids, there is just the very likely possibility that they are not able to play up to that level that we need them to play to be an MLS contender, which is unfortunate. But then again, You know, they are extremely talented. They have proven time and time again that they can play at a high level. So they are also getting older. They're also maturing. They're also getting stronger. So it's very likely that we see someone like McGlynn take that next step and becoming a really true MLS starter, which would be great, because I think both you and I are very high on McGlynn, as I think as everybody is right now. But in terms of the upcoming season, like I mentioned earlier, the season starts on February 26th. It is 2/18 now, so we're only a week and a day away. Any concerns now for Minnesota? Does your expectations for that game change at all? Do you think it's going to be a home win, or will you be happy with a draw?
I mean, obviously, I think you'll want to win. I think, especially the way they lost the Eastern Conference last year, was so disappointing to sort of become so close yet so far. I feel like they will somewhat need to win in a sense as well. You let go 2 or 3 really key players in this window. Again, I don't think anyone probably envisaged Kasper Schmeichel not being on the Union 3 months ago, let alone just a month ago when he was actually let go to Chicago Fire. And again, the same with Jamiro Monteiro. I think, again, obviously there were ideas that perhaps he wasn't settled. Obviously, it was his family. I've seen a lot of people criticising, oh, he didn't want to be here last year, so good riddance. Well, no, the reason he was uncomfortable, wasn't happy, is because he couldn't get his family into the country. Right. He hadn't seen his family for like almost a year, 18 months. And I think anyone would be angry or annoyed if they couldn't have access to their family, being able to see their family. And again, for him, his family are in Europe. I don't know why it's sort of become easier for his family to come in the country now. He's moved over to San Jose.
That's what people were saying too. People are concerned with these visa issues that we find the Union to be in. Not that the Union have struggled overall with bringing players in, but we've seen other clubs right now having no problems with bringing their players in, while we still struggle to get Mikael over.
This is the other aspect I hate about. I don't know whether I hate the general manager, sporting director, football sort of approach where they're essentially like puppeteering how the club is run. I hate that. I feel like the manager should have control of player personnel, who he brings in, who he lets go. Because I sort of feel like, I'm not saying that perhaps it was the right thing to keep Kasper or Jamiro, but I'm somewhat convinced that perhaps Jim would have had more control over these things, and it might be played out differently. So instead, he's been handed the cards he's been dealt. He's not got any power over this. He possibly, I'm not speculating anything, but he could have possibly not wanted Jamiro Monteiro to go, and sort of walks in on Wednesday afternoon, and he's been told, oh, by the way, we're getting rid of Jamiro. Good luck next season.
Yeah, Jamiro. So the depth for this team will certainly be tested come the first month. Even whether Mikael is available week 2 or week 3, whether Sergio's healthy or not week 2 or week 3, I think the depth is going to be tested the most.
Yeah,
and all eyes are on Jim Curtin, because I think a lot of fans, as much as they like Jim, have also had their criticisms of Jim to not be able to take this team to the next level.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's fair or not, that's besides the point. The narrative that Jim Curtin is not able to win a trophy or to compete as a contender is still there in some minority of our group, of the supporter group for the Union.
Yeah.
So I feel bad for Jim overall for having this situation where now he loses 2 key players of his team gone, and they're sort of scrambling to kind of fit it together by the end of the preseason. But regardless, we do have a game next week, and we Jim will have to do the best with it as he possibly can. Since that game is on a Saturday, I think maybe next week we can do a Friday show. Dave, are you thinking next Friday, right?
Yeah, I think Friday works.
Awesome. So maybe we'll do a short preview show for that. I know we've kind of already been discussing it a bit over the preseason. Do maybe some gambling lines. I know Dave and I are big gamblers, so we'll talk about some gambling, see anything we're looking for, and hopefully by next Friday night we have a little bit more news about where this team's going and the direction we're in. But any last words before I read off our sponsors tonight, Dave?
No, I mean, obviously, again, I didn't want that sort of my comments about the director of football, sport director thing to become a slightly distant, because he does a very good job. But I just think that's an aspect of football I'm not a massive fan of. I don't mind the idea of having a director of football just for input and suggesting sort of things and dealing with other things off the field, like that perhaps managers want to deal with, contract negotiations, things such as that, and the manager can just sort of pie it off to them. But like in terms of player personnel, of who the actual manager wants to sign, wants to let go, I sort of feel like it should be more down to the manager as opposed to as a person up above who doesn't actually get to sit there and work them every single day. And I don't know, that's one thing. That's just me. That's probably the traditional English football fan in me. But yeah, that's sort of aspect of things.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a different perspective for sure, and we always like to hear the different perspectives on our show here. But we'll close out with our sponsors. We have Manscaped, 20% off plus free shipping with the code AATBirds at manscaped.com. We have OddsJam, the #1 software platform for sportsbook bandits with a arbitrage calculator. So you can never lose a bet again. Sign up today at oddsjam.com. Check out Statement Games at statementgames.com for a fun new way to fantasy sports and entertainment, win gift prizes, and more. Free to sign up, statementgames.com. Lot Terrain watches at www.lotterrain.com. Use AATBird for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, our own shop we have right here, the Across the Pitch gear and everything else at the AAT Sports Network link right there on the bottom there. So go ahead, get in there, access, shirts, cups, mugs, hoodies, all that fun stuff for all the different shows we have, including our Across the Pitch show. But we're going to wrap it up tonight, Dave. Hopefully next week we'll be discussing the first Philadelphia Union regular season match in what will be a very entertaining, win or lose, a very entertaining campaign for the Union. Have a good night, everybody. Yep.
Exactly. I was going to say, with the way the Union are going, I mean, they might not end up having a striker by this time next week. And the plans might end up being interesting. They'll be stuck with Quinn Sullivan up front.
No, don't say that. All right, guys. Have a good one.